Welcome back, everybody. So, it seems things may be getting a little bit too big. An anecdote to kick us off with is that basically the head of Ubisoft Massive quit, and he basically said, it's too big. It's too big for me I don't want to do this. It's too big. And away he went.
Yep.
And now in today's news, we have got a number of the big quadruple A games seemingly running into the ground a little bit. And VGC are coming in with some incredible reporting on what's going on with The Initiative, which are Microsoft's quadruple A studio that, of course, were working on Perfect Dark. This was announced in 2017. We're fairly sure it still is in pre-production, almost certainly. May have even been rebooted very recently, so there's a lot to talk about, and the studio is facing large issues. I mean, the percentages that we're going to talk about here in terms of staff losses are honestly quite shocking.
Yeah, the worst. I think they're the worst I've ever seen outside of a studio that's being closed, to be honest.
Yeah, it's wild. So, VGC are reporting that up to 34 members of the core development team, that's almost half, because, you start off small, and then when you're ready for production, then you scale. So almost half of the core team have left within the last year. Now, this includes big titles such as Game Director, Design Director, Lead Level Designer, Principal World Builder, 2 Senior Systems Designers, 3 former Santa Monica designers, and more. Now, not add insult to injury, but also they've lost 2 writers, Tech Director, Tech Art Director, the leads of gameplay, engineering, animation, and QA, and now the studio has less than 50 people. Now, this is something that is quite interesting, because if you've been following the studio, you'll know that Crystal Dynamics, who did, say, Tomb Raider,
And Marvel's Avengers.
they have recently basically flown in to help. Not literally flown in, you get what I mean. Now, a lot of these staff losses perhaps seem like they're happening at the same time when another major AAA, in this case studio, is coming in to help.
Yep, certainly.
And certainly this is where you see the AAA, quadruple A. What does that mean? I think it's more potential production budget and ambition. Obviously, this is a case where we've got a AAA studio that is much larger than this quadruple A studio. I think it's just about the scope and the ambition of titles.
Exactly.
Now, VGC have also worked out that they're actually not even hiring that many roles for this company, which is maybe surprising considering how many of those key positions they've actually lost. And that basically means that Crystal Dynamics are probably taking a more strong lead on whatever this Perfect Dark project is actually going to end up being.
Yeah, and that sounds a little bit kind of insane, because obviously, this is the Xbox thing where they got Crystal Dynamics just coming in to do it. But it makes a lot of sense when we look into who's actually running the show at The Initiative and how this might have actually happened.
Yeah, so Andy at VGC did a great job. He was super fast
This is so good.
in getting all this together. So there's interviews with former senior staff citing a lack of creative autonomy and slow development progress as why they left. Basically, the momentum of the project was falling over. And it's one of those things, if you're leading a company or whatever, there needs to be momentum, there needs to be velocity. Staff need to feel like they are, on a snowball that's going bigger.
Yeah, they're making progress.
Yeah, in a good way. Now, the funny thing is, these 2 leads actually were previously at Crystal Dynamics, but the 2 of them basically, according to these reports, had a fairly top-down leadership style, but the studio itself preferred a bit more bottom-up, a bit more autonomous.
Yeah, that's what a lot of the studios, like marketing and stuff, when it was announced, was very much, hey, we're going to bring people in and we'll be bottom-up, we'll have everyone involved creatively in this project. But when it came down to it, when Gallagher and Neuberger when rubber hit the road and they were going forward, they had obviously always done things at Crystal Dynamics in a top-down way, no, we control everything that's happening. And it kind of is a mismatch of how they hired all these people from all these, because they have genuinely some of the best development talent in the world at this studio. It's really it's unbelievable how much money they must have spent on this. But fundamentally, a lot of these people have realized that the studio's not been run the way it was promised to being run.
Yeah, which itself is quite challenging, because
yeah, sure.
You can't be completely bottom up, you can't be completely top down. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
I think we can certainly think of a company like Valve and think, wow, wouldn't it be incredible to work there in this wonderful, bottom up place where things happen because staff just happen to band together internally based on what they care about. But we've all, heard the reports of some of the downsides of Valve culture.
Yeah, nothing gets done.
Yeah, and I think in a universe where you think about games like Anthem, where it's just people are off doing cool shit and we haven't worked out what the game is, You can see how that would mean they wouldn't be going anywhere fast. And then I suppose when these two guys try to tighten things up, then it clashes with the team, which is a mess. So that's basically the way that they were used to leading. It was the way things were done at Crystal Dynamics, according to the report anyway, which could potentially then make a lot of sense because Crystal Dynamics themselves are coming in to help.
Yeah.
So they're going to be working, maybe not with the same people, but at least they're going to be plugging in a familiar company structure, a familiar company ethos, which I suppose is going to help there be some sort of perfect dark game. Now, whether it's going to have a AAA moniker, whatever the hell that means, I'm not particularly sure.
Yeah.
So it's a weird one. Now, management did respond to VGC. They basically just said that they're confident in the team and the new talent that's joining, talking as well about global staffing changes, the difficulty of opening a new studio. Now, Microsoft were said to have been surprisingly lenient with the studio, and I think this is where it could get a little bit more interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah, because you even look at some of the issues that Blizzard has had in terms of like games and stuff, and some of it comes down to being a bit, lenient, being a bit, free and easy, right? With some of like the Morheim leadership style, which ended up, running into some problems. And if the boss is going to be super lenient, not really be tight in deadlines, then where's the completion urgency that actually forces the clay to be shaped into something that can then go in the kiln? Because apparently that's the analogy I'm using today.
Yeah, especially when you've got a bunch of like developers who are generally, creative people and creative work. They're always going to want to tweak. They're always going to want to tinker and make something better. And that's kind of the story of like how Overwatch came to be out of Project Titan. That's what happened to Blizzard, never releasing games for years and years at a time. And I feel like Microsoft are kind of getting into this possibility now. But for Microsoft, it makes sense because it could be an overcorrection from their past. Because obviously Microsoft past was, I think everyone in the industry knows this. They were extremely controlling with all their studios, and that's why they were known as like the studio killers. EA were more or less the same. Whereas like, oh, this studio's working with him. Oh no, that's not very good. The same happened with, most recently I think is, was it Alpha Protocol? I can't remember the name of it, but there was one really notorious game that Microsoft fiddled with the devs every stage of the way and ultimately killed the studio. And then the Microsoft and Scalebound thing happened, and that's obviously, fault on both sides there for sure. But it's just a case of they were maybe too controlling, asked for things that weren't supposed to go in there. I think they did the same with Level 5, the Japanese RPG developer. That's something else as well. But now they're going, okay, well, we need to give developers freedom and give them the time to make what they need to make. And that's obviously worked out fairly well for Halo, going, no, take the time. Take the time, it's fine.
Well, 343 seems like it needed to have cultural issues and management issues also be polished up. Yeah,
so it's like they may be overcorrecting here. So I think it's kind of up to them to go, okay, well, this is maybe a little bit too much. Gallagher is burning all our money and we've got nothing for it. So they need to learn to kind of put the screws a little bit, but not too harsh.
Yeah, and it's kind of brutal. Like, look at this, right? So this is some of the more worse hit divisions. Like, here's design. There's more people gone than still there.
That's 12 gone and 7 still there.
Yeah, and if you look at these people, like, of the remaining, Red Dead, Forza Horizon, Motive, Naughty Dog, Crystal Dynamics, nothing for Christian apparently, Crystal Dynamics and Daybreak, right? So that's there. Writers, half. 2 of them gone, 2 of them left. Programming. Quite brutal, really. Quite brutal.
There's a senior graphics engineer from Naughty Dog gone. That is a lot. That's incredible. Like, that's the kind of staff you don't want to lose. Especially looking at the design, you're like, well, there's obviously Newberger was sort of the problem allegedly in terms of how it was being run. But Tomb Raider director, you've got design director from God of War, you've got Respawn, id, and God of War people all over the place in terms of senior systems design, and they're just gone. I think it was Drew Murray, the design director, went back to Insomniac, left Insomniac, went here and went, no, I'm going back to Insomniac. And if you're thinking about employee satisfaction, you can see why, because Insomniac are doing great stuff.
I imagine the division was nice, or not the division, the initiative. I imagine, I suppose there you go, the initiative could also be some sort of loot shooter as well. But like, I imagine it was a nice place to work, that these people weren't pressured. I think ultimately it may have just failed in the whole creative satisfaction thing.
Yep.
When it, the combo of nothing's going anywhere fast, and then suddenly it's top down and it starts to feel weird. Now, there's more going on here, because there's other similar studios that seem to be having issues, right? Because this is our third, I don't want to say failed AAA game, just slow to the point where I don't think it's where they want it to be. Because Beyond Good and Evil 2, that was called AAA. Where is it? What's going on? Skull and Bones. That was also considered quadruple A by Ubisoft, and that's nowhere to be seen. The last we'd heard, it was basically $120 million down the hole, which, I mean, they're approaching double Project Titan, so that's nice. And seemingly a game with constant reboots, constant changes, not really a clear identity or direction.
Yep.
That's brutal.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're going to have whenever you're going for this like quadruple A approach. Obviously, the initiative were small in the studio, but like Ubisoft teams are getting massive, and they weren't just we've got a big studio. We're going to get multiple studios to work on this because that's the ambition we have.
Yeah,
we need loads of bodies to make this, but with every it's I think it's a classic situation of too many cooks, where once you go above a certain number of people, I mean, how many is you're supposed to have in your head at one time? 150 people. When you have
was it Monkey Sphere?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. But you've got, when you have to think about as a director or as a team of directors, you have to think about the project that's going to come out of 300, 400, 500 staff. It's like, how are you supposed to keep all of those individual creative elements aligned into this one vision? Not to say it's impossible, because it has happened, but it's just exceedingly difficult to do.
Yeah, and to just go over like how brutal this is for Ubisoft, because we know of the Ubisoft successes, right? Like, Valhalla and all of that, but the amount of money they're throwing into projects that are seemingly nowhere, at least thus far, or, we're not sure. So this is per Bloomberg. Skull and Bones has been delayed several times. We, of course, know about the extensive reporting into that. Beyond Good and Evil 2, where's that? That apparently is in pre-production after at least 5 years of development.
Yep.
Like, how are you still in pre-production after 5 years? Yeah. I suppose if it still is in pre-production, then perhaps it's not incurring a truly humongous cost.
Maybe.
To the company, but still. And then also there's a planned remake of Prince of Persia that was delayed indefinitely.
Indeed, yep.
So that's a lot of problems, a lot of issues. And then we go into Ubisoft Massive, where I think this just starts to bring the human element in, where, managing director, David, right? He's been there for 17 years. He took a 6-month break. He came back and he handed in a 6-month notice.
Yep.
He's gone.
Yeah, he did. He did all the soul searching and he found that he didn't want to work there.
Yeah, like he said, I think my philosophy and my skills work well for a certain kind of group, a certain kind of size, but I don't think I'm the right manager for what the studio's become. I'm perfectly at peace with that. I mean, yeah, if you think about what would be creatively satisfying, even thinking about myself, it's like, you want to make some cool games, you want to focus on, some cool games, you want to actually be able to focus on the things so that they can be creatively satisfying, or, even just satisfying the Factorio sense of, you're setting up the things. And but then it just gets so large that you're managing managers and that's your job.
Yeah, because, I mean, thinking about Ubisoft Massive in particular, over 750 people working there, and they're working on, I think they're still involved in upkeep for Division 2, I'm not super sure on that, but they're working on Division Heartland, which was that big free-to-play game, I believe. That's supposed to be the big new push for the Division series. They're working on the open world Star Wars games that obviously Ubisoft are going to put a lot of effort into that. That's going to be, Ubisoft open world jokes aside, that's going to be, like, as far as they're concerned, one of their biggest possibility projects of all time.
Absolutely.
And they've also got Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which is, Avatar's probably not going to revive quite as strong as people would hope. I don't quite think the movie's initial success is going to work again, but...
Where's movie 2 and 3? What's going on?
Yeah, but exactly, it's still like this is a massive game that they've been working on for years and years and years. And there's going to be so little fun in managing all of that happening, especially if you've joined and you're studio lead and you're working on games, you're like, you probably want something hands-on, or at least be able to play with them and go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's have some idea chat. Instead, it's just, I have to manage 750 people. This is not what I joined games to do. Goodbye. And I think that's what we've seen so many places of all of these like veteran developers going, there's all the VC and angel investor money in the world. I'm going to go start a new studio, because massive studios is not fun for people to make. It is not cohesive for fun games to come out of them. Yeah. Realistically.
Ultimately, I think what we learn here is that across all of these scales, the most important thing is creating a work environment where people actually feel motivated, they feel that the progress is reasonable, which does pretty much mean that certain constraints and timing have to exist.
Yep.
And then also size, because you can't get to the point where it's no longer satisfying for a human. So as you're going to a scale of 750, how do you make that a great place for all 750?
Yeah.
Mighty challenge.
Yep.
Mighty challenging one that I think we're just going to have to deal with because the games industry is getting bloody big, and I think it's probably going to keep on happening.
Absolutely.
So there we go. AAA. I think it's almost going to be a bit of a victim of its own moniker.
Yeah, it was never going to work. Like,
yeah, I mean, great AAA games, big AAA games, just call them that. But I almost wonder if there is such a pressure to break new ground, such a pressure to be utterly transformational that it kind of falls under its own weight. I mean, I can understand a bunch of people almost being in an artist's incubator with the initiative. That's almost what it would have sounded like at the start.
Yeah.
And that could be really satisfying, but ultimately a game needs to be made. You then have obviously a mismatch of wants and desires and management. I don't know. Perhaps a AAA game is less something that is set out to be made and more something that just naturally happens as we get better at making games.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you think of AAA and you think, what exists that could maybe match that a little bit? And in terms of pure scale, you're thinking maybe Assassin's Creed Valhalla, because that's hundreds of hours. But, I think there's a lot of consumers are growing tired of that, especially, well, I mean, this is a critical response, but IGN gave the latest expansion, Dawn of Ragnarok, I think it's called, give it a 6 out of 10, because they're like, this is just 30 to 40 hours of more Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I'm bored.
That's what a lot of people said of the latest Far Cry.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously those are Ubisoft problems, but it's like, when does the next Sony open world not feel good enough or unique enough or transformative enough? Because, like, I mean, I think the best example is Horizon Forbidden West being cut off by Elden Ring. It's like, I know which of those games I'd play a sequel to. Because Forbidden West, it's great, it's massive, it is like, probably something close to like 80, 90 hours of like really just pretty good game the whole way through. Everything well considered, all the detail put in being beautiful, but it's not transformative, it's not new, it's Horizon Zero Dawn, but bigger and nicer.
Well, is that what AAA is? Is it basically saying, hey, we want a game with the glitz and the scale of AAA, but it's going to feel different, it's going to feel new, it's going to be innovative?
Maybe that's what they should call it, yeah.
At which point do you just have a really tricky situation of that requires loads of ideation and loads of prototyping that's really expensive, because I think breaking new ground 20 years ago or 10 years ago is probably a lot easier in a way, because you can just sit there, innovate in the mechanics, innovate in the ideas, and then all your art and stuff like that is easier, a bit cheaper to do than it is now. But now it's like, you got to do all of that innovation, but also people are used to realistic horse testicles and, perfect rope physics, perfect animation. If I think about Uncharted, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like the bar is raised so high that I guess that's what AAA is. It's the challenge of breaking new ground whilst maintaining the AAA production values that a lot of gamers do expect these days.
Yep.
Yeah, well, good luck to them, because if they
Absolutely.
could pull that off, it actually would be pretty cool. So I hope it works well for you, Microsoft, and everybody else. But I wouldn't hold my breath till it comes out.
Nope. No, I think scale.
You'd suffocate.
Yep.
Too long.
There's diminishing returns on scale in games, and I think we have very, very much hit that. Especially as we enter the realm of people have more games to play than they have time. Then, if Horizon Forbidden West was as good but 20 hours long and cost a bit less, would that be a better game? Maybe. Probably.
To me, yes. To a lot of other people, no.
Well, this is where I think it's like, if it released more regularly and was cheaper, maybe. But then obviously that comes with its own drawbacks.
Yeah, so there you go. Big challenge in game development. Look, what do you think? What is, if Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a AAA game and Horizon Forbidden West is a AAA game, and you think about what those games are, what's the AAA version of that? How is it different? How's the gameplay different? How's your fantasy different? Let us know. I'll see you next time.